All right, guys, welcome back to the Real Sports Talk. Today, we got a really special episode for you, episode 21. We have Alyssa Charlston, Fox 13 sports anchor slash reporter and color analyst. We are super excited to have her today. Miss Alyssa, how are you doing?
I am doing really well. I'm pumped. This is such a fun time of the season over here in Seattle with Kraken starting preseason, Mariners maybe making the playoffs, and Seahawks getting after it to start the season. I'm busy, but I'm doing well.
That's good to hear. As I was telling you a little bit before, we're really rooting for the Mariners over here. We're really hoping that they pull it out, so that way we can go to Seattle and actually figure out plane tickets and what we need to do and everything. So that'd be
Great.
really nice. But let's get right into this. Kind of just explain, share just like an overview of your background and kind of what inspired you to get into broadcasting and digital media.
Well, the thing that inspired me was really early on in my life. My dad, I was born in Boise, but I grew up a lot in Spokane. So 7 years, and my dad was actually a news anchor at Krem too. So I saw the inner workings of a newsroom and the excitement that goes behind it, all the lights and the fun and like the breaking news aspect and delivering information. And I just loved that. And I've always looked forward to speeches. I've always, enjoyed those like kind of exciting high pressure moments. And it was kind of natural to go into sports because I went to the University of Idaho, played basketball there, and then played overseas, and then came back, kind of figured out what I wanted to do, and ended up working at KXLY in Spokane. So a lot of my story is in Spokane, and being surrounded by like crazy, incredible talent there. I saw you had Larry Weir on this podcast a little bit ago. Love that guy. He's a legend, and he's so good at what he does. Keith Oso, also a big part of my career and becoming who I am. Dennis Katchen, even he helped me with my internship in Spokane. So a ton of roots in Spokane. I love that place. And then got the job here at Fox 13. But when I was at Idaho, I did a lot of broadcast and digital media work where I was literally sprinting from my practice with like knee pads and ankle braces. Yes, we had to wear knee pads, over to the football practice to get an interview with a football player, and then shower and then get homework done and all that stuff. So it's always been a passion thing for me. I've stacked a lot of things on top of each other in a lot of days and a lot of hours, but it's 100% worth it. As people who love sports, they get that. So now I'm here in Seattle and I love what I do here at Fox 13, formerly Q13. Aaron Levine is my sports director. He's also incredible at what he does and really enjoying it.
KHQ. So Dennis was the sports producer, or he's a sports, what do you call that? Director.
Yep.
Yeah, at KHQ. So love, I love Keith, love Dennis. Little funny story real quick. I used to call into their show all the time when I was younger and do buy or sell when I was like a little
No
kid.
way.
Yeah, all the time. That's how I like interacted with them. But we'll kind of move on. Um, Let's talk a little bit of your time at Idaho real quick. Give me a time over there. What year was your best year? What year do you think was your best year?
Individual stat wise, it was my junior year. Senior year was also great, but we had another kind of star step up too. So it was her and me, Stacy Barr, and she was phenomenal. Like we won the WAC my junior and senior year. So that junior year is where we played Yukon with Brianna Stewart on the team. She didn't play. We still lost by a lot. But my senior year, we won the WAC again, and we kind of dominated the WAC. It was like the last year that Idaho was in the WAC. So, yeah, junior year was definitely better, and that was kind of like a first team. I think sophomore and junior year was first team all conference. But then senior year, I think it was second team. But it was totally fine with me because all I cared about was winning, and Stacy and I were kind of grooving together. So you had to stop both of us.
Give me like a locker room story that you take from that time
Oh man, there are a lot.
that you can
Oh,
talk about, of course. I don't want you to get in any,
get in any trouble.
yeah, unwritten rules.
I mean, there are times where, and I loved my coach there, John Newey. He's not there now after they switched, made a coaching change, and mutually parted ways. He was the winningest coach in program history. he was incredible. I don't love that he's not there anymore, but that's the way things go in college athletics. He he would get mad if we weren't playing well, so he'd come in and just kind of like be in a tizzy. Like he would just kind of have some anger to him, but it always motivated us. We did some funny, like, it was before TikTok, obviously, so there was some sort of like dance that we all did. Like we all dressed up really weird and did like a video inside the locker room together. That's for some reason the one thing that like really stands out in my mind. And then my senior night, my teammates decked out my locker, like covered the whole thing in streamers and celebration. And it was like obviously a hassle too, because they wanted it to get to my stuff. They like locked everything and taped everything. But the best memories were in that locker room. I mean, I spent hours and hours there every week.
What do you miss about it?
So much. I mean, I'll still have dreams about it. The competitiveness, the having a schedule made for you aspect to it, you know, where people tell you when to work out and make sure that you're working out hard. It just changes once you're outside. That's why a lot of people, like, I know offensive linemen generally lose weight after their college careers, but a lot of these high cardio sports like basketball gain weight because you're not working at the same level and you're still eating the same amount. But it's always the bus rides and the locker room moments for me. It's cool to win games and stuff, but you don't really remember. That sounds corny, but you don't remember the wins and losses as much. Like I can hardly even remember a lot of games, you know, winning championships. That was sweet. But the friendships and the funny jokes you have with your teammates built in those locker rooms and on those bus rides when you're going from like the middle of nowhere, Louisiana to Ruston to play La Tech, or somewhere in Utah to play Utah State, like random city in Utah. Those are the moments that I miss all the time. Because once you get out of college, you spend a lot of time alone. And that's just kind of the way things go. So I think constantly being surrounded by family, your friends, your teammates, that is absolutely what I miss the most.
What were your guys' thoughts and what were you guys talking about going into that Yukon game?
I mean, everybody outside of us literally was saying, shock the world. Like, who knows what can happen? You're fine. Like, who knows what can happen? Go do your best and shock the world. We made a lot of jokes like, oh yeah, it's going to be so easy. Like just taking on perennially the number one team in the nation, I remember looking at the scouting report and laughing with my teammates because it was like 6'4" guard, 6'3" guard, 6'4" guard, point guard, 6'1". I was like, I'm 6'1" and I'm R4. So we laughed about that. But we also were like, we bought into the shock the world. Who knows what can happen? A 16 versus 1. But we were pretty realistic. Like the coach was super optimistic. You have to be in that scenario. But we were like, I mean, we know it's Yukon. And they were just so physically dominant. The landscape has changed, which I love. Iowa is getting star players. South Carolina has become a national powerhouse. Stanford continues to be a national powerhouse. Stanford lost to Yukon by 50 in that same tournament that we lost to Yukon. So there was no parity. It was much less parity. And then it started getting better the next year when we played Louisville, because we were up on Louisville for a little bit in that first half when we played them in the NCAA tournament the next year. But yeah, we were pretty realistic.
That's good. I always wonder about like what like a team like, or like this past season when Montana State went on to play, what was it, Kansas State in the tournament. I always wonder like what you talk about in that locker room, because like I know everybody knows or everybody thinks that they're the best or that they're like, but like I don't know, are we still like, do we still have like realistic, I don't want to say realistic thoughts, but like because I know you probably think that you could beat even that 6'4" person like no matter what. But before we get yes, most definitely. Before we get too far into that, I want to talk a little bit on like the sports side real quick. I want to get your perspective on a couple of things real quick. So I seen there was like 8 new injuries on the report today or something like that, or not 8, but there was just a whole bunch of injuries and everything. What do you think goes into all, like, I feel like there's more injuries now, like especially this year and like the last like couple years leading up to it. I feel like there was more injuries now, and I don't have any statistics to back that up. But I just seeing like both of the tackles go down. Jamal Adams is still not healthy. Do you think it's I know everybody thinks with like the Aaron Rodgers thing, is it the turf? Is it like, are they not playing enough preseason games? What do you say about that?
Well, first of all, great news because Jamal Adams has been out forever. Pete Carroll confirmed today he will start in week 4, which is great news. But it is odd. I think a lot of the injury report stuff, like the questionable players early in the week, become like guaranteed they're going to play. I think coaches like to give them a rest day as much as they can. It's almost like that load management. It feels like that to me. I know they're legitimate injuries. I think they're also trying to put where you wouldn't put it on the injury report earlier because it was kind of a sign of weakness or like less toughness. You know, even in the 07, 08, 09, 10, you just didn't see it as often. Like the injury report was way smaller. There's a lot of statistics that back up artificial turf being more dangerous compared to grass, especially the stuff that NFL Players Association brings up, the stats that they bring to it. And the NFL has a record of getting their own consulting firm and getting information that's not always correct. I mean, one watch of Concussion, the movie with Will Smith, you see what they tried to kind of do to protect their image. And they've created an image and a entertainment aspect to it that like we've never seen before. The NFL is an incredible product, but there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff that goes into protecting it that isn't exactly 100% ethical. I think a lot of people see that, and they're trying to protect that image. So this is something where the NFLPA is imploring, like players are imploring every arena, stadium to be natural grass. I think that impacts it, but I think it's also a lot of people are far more athletic and strength driven now. You see the most freaky athletes we've ever seen, and that's a lot of time in the weight room. We've learned a lot about how to strength train, how to get better explosion, how to get faster. And that turns into, I mean, that's physics, you know, a bigger body, mass body. I mean, in terms of like weight and muscle clashing harder and faster into another body, you're going to get more injuries. So I think that's a natural part of it. I do think we will slowly probably see more natural grass across the league.
What are your thoughts on this year's Seahawks team?
I really feel like we're going to learn a lot more in week 4. When you get Jamal Adams in there, their pass game on defense is the thing that I really question right now, just because there's a lot of miscommunication in the secondary. And Carolina was literally the worst passing team per game in the league. They were averaging like 133. Andy Dalton, veteran backup, who is better than Bryce Young right now because he's got more experience, but Bryce Young has way more intangibles, a way higher ceiling. Andy Dalton goes and throws 361 yards. I think that's like the 3rd or 4th most among any quarterback this week. So the pass game has a lot to figure out. Jamal helps in all kinds of ways. He helps with the pass rush. He helps with the run game. He helps linebackers. He helps with the secondary and coverage as well. Funny that like he's a safety and that's the last thing I list is coverage, but he is more of a pressure guy, I feel like, than anything. And he will solve a lot of problems by his character and his charisma and his excitement and intensity alone. I feel like we're going to know a lot more about this team. They are a playoff team. Like they have all the skills to be a playoff team. It will be a wild card because I think San Francisco's running away with the league. I mean, they are far and away the best roster, the most talented.
Most definitely.
Like the most disciplined. So I think they will finish second in the NFC West. I don't think the LA Rams will continue to be quite the team they've been. Puka Nacua has been phenomenal, fun to watch. I don't know if I believe Rams yet. Prove me wrong. That defense was so anonymous, like Aaron Donald and then who, and those guys stepped up. But the Seahawks should be a wild card team, and they should win at least. I feel like they should win 2 games in once they get into the playoffs.
Okay, so I have a theory that I want to just like let you know real quick. Okay. So this is more of like a Seahawks, like a San Francisco or San Francisco. I'm trying to think of those like perennial Chiefs. They all have really good head coaches like Pete Carroll. They have really good GMs. They elevate their quarterbacks to better than what they are. And then they do like what the 49ers did this year, where they just kind of just dispose of Garoppolo to the what is it, Vegas now.
Yeah.
The Seahawks trade Russell Wilson, and I felt like Russell Wilson was on the decline maybe the last year or two that he was in Seattle, but you could just I felt like his stats were just really good. But I just feel like these types of teams elevate these players and then they trade them away for good assets. And maybe they aren't as talented, or they're not as like Brock Purdy. I don't think Brock Purdy is the best, maybe top 10 quarterback in the league right now, but he has the best team in the league. And I'm sure there's probably somebody that's going to say that Brock Purdy is a top 10 quarterback, but what say you on that?
I mean, Brock Purdy is number one on the list. No, I'm kidding. You're 100% right. I think that's a really good point. Organizations make a huge difference. They work way up here to make sure that the product on the field is good. And the biggest sign of that is the Seahawks' consistency. I mean, it's a shock when they don't make the playoffs. I think 2 times since Pete Carroll's been head coach, they've missed the playoffs, and John Schneider's been GM. They came in the same year. So that's the kind of interesting part. We haven't seen the independent variable, right? Like we haven't seen Pete without John or John without Pete. I thought it was interesting when we saw Pete without Russell and we saw who thrived. Like the Denver Broncos are a mess right now. Russell Wilson is better this year, but he's not what he was with the Seahawks. And it kind of shows that Pete Carroll got the best out of him. But you have to, I think the defensive line has never been more important in the game because quarterbacks are so talented. And you see, like, I respect Derek Carr, but I see the difference between Derek Carr and Justin Herbert when I watch those two play. And I see the difference between Patrick Mahomes and even a Kirk Cousins. The Kirk Cousins, he can still be very accurate, but just the accuracy and the IQ to put the ball in a certain place where you know one receiver can get to and the cornerback can't, or one of your receivers can get to and your other receiver can't, so you're going to that one. That's just, it's incredible the kind of money, time, and like if you watch Quarterback on Netflix, the preparation of Patrick Mahomes, oh my gosh, like every day is different. And he's doing like literal jump squats, like jump squat reverse lunges with 200 pounds on his back, like a few days before a game. So it's just, there's such a tangent, but that the level of quarterback play we've seen is being rivaled by defensive line players. And that's where I feel like the Seahawks have not quite caught up with the game there. That they had it, right, with the 2014 team, 2013, 14, 15 teams that made it to the Super Bowl with Michael Bennett and, you know, the whole crew. They just haven't drafted quite a player that's been that impactful. I think they wanted Darrell Taylor to be that guy, but he just hasn't quite turned into that, you know, in the second or third rounder. That's where San Francisco has gotten it right and have really succeeded with a bunch of early draft picks on their defensive line and their linebacking core.
Okay, so I have heard from the national media. They said this last year too, but let's say the Seahawks have like the 25th pick or like the 20th pick around there in that like type of area. Do you think they take a quarterback next year? Do they take Paxton, is that his name, out of UW?
Oh, Penix.
Penix. Yeah. Yes, sorry. If he's available or something, like, do you think they take a quarterback with their first pick?
I mean, they're really trending toward best player available. I was kind of surprised they didn't go for Anthony Richardson when he was there for them to take. No, he wasn't there. Anthony Richardson was taken right before. But there were multiple quarterbacks that were good in this draft. Next year's draft looks even better in terms of quarterbacks. I wouldn't be surprised for a second if the Seahawks draft a quarterback in 2024. You have to go for a backup plan. Geno Smith has to prove himself this year. This is his true prove-it year to see if he can do what he did last year. So far, kind of a mixed bag. Like against the Panthers, he was kind of subpar in the first half, moments of greatness, but then just inaccurate other times, and threw a pick on third down, which is just backbreaking. So I think the second half he was much better. I think you have to go for best player available now because you want, like you talked about, draft players, develop them. And if you can trade them, or if you can afford to trade them, right? Unless you want to keep them, like a Nick Bosa or something, you want to keep that kind of player. But if that's a high quality player, you can either get pieces for them or utilize him as if Geno Smith, in the next couple of years deteriorates. I don't think he will. I think he's incredibly motivated. He's got a really good head on his shoulders, but you have to be aware at 25, there could be a really good quarterback available. It all depends on their evaluation of him and if he's like a Seahawks football quarterback that they want.
I know when Gino watches this, I just want you to know, my guy, you are my fantasy quarterback this year. So if you ball out, you're only helping me. I'm just saying, like,
I'm sure
just so you know. Yeah. Okay. I want to talk about a couple players real quick. You kind of mentioned one of them, but I want to talk Jamal Adams. You said he's coming back this week.
Yep.
In what capacity? Is he going to play every down? Is he going to play half the game?
I think
what do you see?
For however many snaps they want him full time, I say he plays 80 to 90% of that, because he was already almost ready to come back last week. This was kind of the safety insurance week to give him that, extra 6 days, 5 days. And actually they're playing Monday night, so even more time to get right. I don't see any reason why he shouldn't be 90%, because he's going to have some legit practices this week, maybe one or two with some contact. But I wouldn't be surprised if he's in 80, maybe 80%, just because contact wise, you're going to be battling just to figure out what it's like to throw your body at somebody else for a full game scenario with the kind of adrenaline that goes with a game, right? It's not the same as practice. So I say we see probably 80% of what we will see, hoping he stays healthy after that, 100%.
Okay. Let's talk a little Jackson Smith, Njigba. How do you say his last name?
It's just Njigba.
Njigba.
Jackson Smith.
I feel like I should know this because I'm a Nebraska fan and he torched us for 3 years. So like, I feel like I should know, like I heard the last name, I've seen it multiple times in the end zone. So like, yeah. I feel like I should know that, but let me, kind of explain. I feel like people set very lofty goals on him this year, unrealistic. I know he could be a third wide receiver, but I feel he's still 3, 4.
He might even be 22. I mean,
exactly. Like,
yeah.
Yeah. What do you? Oh, sorry.
No, you go ahead. I'm gonna look up.
That was pretty much it. But what do you like? What do you see out of him? What is his role this season? Do you see him inserting himself into that third spot, or is he still like, maybe is he still a year away?
He's 21. That's crazy. So,
just barely old enough to drink.
Just barely legal.
Yeah, playing in the NFL, good for him.
Yeah, no, you're right. The expectations were really high for him, and I think people wanted him to be more than what he's doing right now, but look, it's hard to get open in this league. The separation statistic is hard to master. It's something that Tyler Lockett has absolutely mastered, but he still gets a ton of physicality. And I mean, if you watch Tyler run routes, he is getting mauled a lot of times. And that's, scouting report, that's what you do against a player like him, because that's the advantage you have is strength and speed and physicality. Not speed. Sorry. He's got speed. He's got quickness and intelligence and just quick twitch. That's where Jackson Smith sits next to him quite a bit on the bench when the offense comes off the field. He's usually next to Tyler, trying to pick his brain, trying to learn from him. But Jackson Smith and Njigba is not as fast. Like, his 40 time was decent, but his quickness is not what he's known for. It's his intelligence. So that's where he lacks in terms of Tyler Lockett. But his hands are unbelievable. They truly are. Like, the whole joke that like he had not dropped a pass in training camp until like 4 weeks in, that was legitimate. Like, I had never seen him drop a pass until one day in late August. So I think they'll figure it out, but there's going to be an adjustment period. He's not a Justin Jefferson. We can't expect that. He's a completely different kind of player. He is going to be more of a slot receiver. He's going to be slants. He's going to be in the middle of the field, which is phenomenal because DK is go. Like, Tyler is everything but he can go, right? He can get loose and get deep. He's also a great guy in the middle, but I think him and Gino will continue to have, they'll get there in time. Jackson's still learning a lot, and he's absorbing that physicality that's different from the college level.
I agree with that. Okay, I kind of want to shift over to the defensive side real quick. Let's talk. Jared Reed had, I believe, 7 tackles yesterday. I don't have the stats in front of me right now, but I'm pretty sure I heard that in the post game yesterday. Kind of talk about Jared Reed. I know he's been here for a couple of years, but like, kind of just talk about him and like the steps that he's made this season and just stepping into the nose tackle role.
Well, Pete was really excited to get him back. I don't know where he was the last. I'm forgetting. He was with Green Bay at some point. But to get him back in this position, the Seahawks haven't really had the kind of nose tackle they need with the defense they're playing. So Al Woods, Brian Monet, like those guys were important players. They just weren't the same kind of player. Al Woods was a mammoth of a man. And Jared Reed is big, but he's nowhere near the same size. Jaron was everywhere yesterday. When they were playing the Panthers, he was all over the place. I think it was either 7 or 8 tackles, to your point. 7 quarterback hits. No. 3. He had 3 quarterback hits, 1.5 sacks. So that was by far his best game. And I think the communication behind him and to his right and left is getting better and better. I think Bobby Wagner, continuing to work with him, people in the press box kind of talking about like Bobby has to continue to get Speedy 2 places, 2 double teams. And once he does, I mean, he's been a phenomenal player, communicator, leader, telling people where to go. You cannot replicate what he does. He's got all the experience in the world. He has seen everything. But I think him, Uchenna Nwosu, Darrell Taylor, like getting more guys that are more consistent, and Draymond Jones, like highest paid free agent in the Pete Carroll era, and hasn't really shown us what he's capable of yet. So I think Jaron will really benefit from those guys continuing to be like, once they become kind of animals on the outside, getting Jamal back, I think that's only going to help Jaron Reed. And I think he's really fit well into that newer system. I mean, with Clint Hurt coming in and kind of changing up the scheme a little bit, he fits perfectly into it. Uchenna Nwosu fits perfectly into that scheme too. So coming from the Chargers, I think Jaron is really, he's been doing a really good job.
Okay. I got a question for you. Okay, so last question on the Seahawks here, and then we will transition into some Mariner talk just real quick. Trey Brown. I have been seeing, I like to go to like teams' Instagrams and see like what fans are saying in the comments and stuff. And like I always go to the Seahawks after wins and stuff and see what everybody's saying. And I feel like the dislike for this kid is just so heavy. What is Trey Brown? Is he going to be able to step into that role? I know he's injured right now, correct?
He was evaluated with a concussion. So I don't know the latest on what Pete said about him today, but that's obviously not great news for him to play on Monday.
Kind of just talk about Trey Brown and like the player and like the person and like just kind of like what you've been able to see.
Well, there were high expectations, I think, for him to be a backup cornerback, and there was worry when Devin Witherspoon was playing. It was kind of confusing because Devin Witherspoon played a lot of nickel, like almost completely played nickel in training camp. But then he was only playing for like 2 or 3 days, and then he got injured, and then he came back, and we couldn't really watch practice by the time he came back. So a little bit of a surprise to see him play corner. You kind of knew, number 5 draft pick, you want him to play corner. You don't exactly want to see your number 5 draft pick playing nickel because you want him there every single down that you can. And across from Reek Woolen is great news too. But and Reek Woolen will also be back against the Giants, so that's good. But Trey had just some coverage problems in the preseason. I don't think he excelled to the way he wanted to. His season that was really important, I think it was the end of 2021, and then he got injured, and then he was out. So he started a bunch of games, and then he was out, and then struggled to get back into the lineup and be an impact player. Pete Carroll liked what he saw this season and said he was one of the hardest workers in training camp, looked really good, but he is definitely a smaller corner. And you have to be pretty freaking special if you're going to give up a lot of size to some of these wide receivers like a DK Metcalf. You're just as quick as him. You got to be even quicker. So I think there's definitely, I've seen some of the hate too, and I think it's just you've seen enough mistakes. But then he had an incredible game in Detroit. He still had some errors there too, but he came in not really expecting to be in a starting role, but then Rick Woolen went out, and he had to be. So we have to remember, I believe he was a 3rd-round draft pick. So you got to be reasonable with it. But he's, for where Pete kind of put him this year in terms of expectation, he hasn't quite met that.
Okay. Well, we are rooting for him. I enjoy him, and I like him as a player. So we're rooting for him. Let's kind of transition off of the Seahawks real quick. If the Mariners don't make the playoffs this year, is this season a disappointment?
Yeah. I don't think there's no two ways about it. The expectation was playoffs. And in spring training, players were telling me we shouldn't just set our goal on playoffs. We want to be a World Series team. They have a chance to miss the playoffs entirely after being first place in August. I mean, it's just frustrating, because how do you go from, ending a drought, having what a lot of people are calling one of the best players in baseball, and Julio Rodriguez, and he will be in the next 2-3 years. He does it on both sides of the ball. This whole season, the players believed that they were a playoff team, and we were told in the off season that we weren't going after free agents because didn't really need to, and the price was astronomical, right, for some of these players, like Xander Bogaerts and I believe Carlos Correa, just kind of crazy. But the additions they made, you DFA'd Colton Wong. A guy that you thought was going to be, and his track record was decent, but the last 2 years, not quite the player that you believe was going to be a difference maker, especially in the lineup. And the last couple days, when you start Sam Haggerty, Dylan Moore, Jose Caballero, and that
just tells you all you need to know.
Yeah, and it's nothing against those guys, but you just have to look at the numbers. When they were playing the Dodgers and you look up at the board and you see batting average and slugging, their lineup versus ours, there were 2 or 3 guys on the Mariners roster that could compare with. And the Dodgers 7, 8, 9 hole players were just a completely different. And 20 points in a batting average can make a huge difference, right? But from setting a franchise record with 21 wins in August to what they've done in September, they're averaging 2 fewer hits a game in September. Batting average is down 46 points. Slugging is down 84 points. OPS down 145. And then their pitching hasn't been as good either. Their average is 3.76 ERA for 2023. Last 28 days, they're 4.22. So both aspects not really coming in clutch. And then their bullpen has been up and down. Losing Paul Sewald, that hurt, no doubt.
Why do you feel like the team, I know they say the money and everything, but do you feel like we were just too far out? What was the situation? Why do you feel like they didn't capitalize at the trading deadline with a batter, or going out there, maybe letting I don't want to say a Henry Ford or somebody, but it's somebody of that stature go to maybe get somebody that is a viable bat.
Hard to get inside of Jerry DePoto's head. I think he's got a really incredible eye for pitching talent. That's you can't, it's undisputed. The Mariners have one of the best starting rotations in the business. But when it comes to hitting talent, they didn't really say. I think they really believed that Josh Rojas and Dom Canzone could make a huge difference. And for a little bit they did. It was kind of rough going in the first 2 weeks, and then Josh Rojas gets his first hit. Dom Canzone starts contributing. But it all kind of starts with Julio. Julio getting hot like we've never seen before. He made it contagious throughout the rest of the lineup. And Canzone, I know he hit a nuke homer last week. but those two guys have not been what you needed exactly. It was like just good enough, but not enough to sustain. And the fact that it happened in the second month that they're here is where the letdown happened. That's what hurts the most, because September has just been abysmal. And I think they lost 8 of their first 11 games. But the good news is the Astros have also been absolutely falling apart. What's going to make a big difference? I mean, the Astros have lost 9 of their last 12. 7 of them were either against the A's or the Royals. That's wild to think about with the rotation they also have. Michael Brantley is one of the only lefties in their lineup. He has been injured. He's been in and out of their lineup in September. That is key. Like, he's not in the lineup tonight against the Mariners, but the Mariners rotation is entirely right-handed. If you have a lefty that can come in and cause some havoc, I mean, that could be a difference maker for the Astros. And I don't know the level of his health right now, but it's kind of the same old story. Like, the last couple years, the Mariners just weren't willing to go in on a big hitter. And I don't know if that's like nightmares for Robinson Cano when that didn't quite go well enough and they didn't get what they wanted, and they had Nelson Cruz too. It's like they went in the opposite directions. Like, we're going to do it by platoon and like just, next man up, keep the lineup moving.
I was thinking this a couple days ago. Julio is, I don't think there is somebody on this green earth that does not like Julio Rodriguez. Like, I think there is somebody for everybody that like does not like somebody. Like, and Julio is just not one of them. Like, I don't get like how even like the other team, when I see him like get on base, like he'll go to every single base and talk and chat it up like with everybody. Yes. Like, I love Julio. Julio is like, he's a little bit younger than me, but like we're about in that age group and things like that. I just enjoy, because I feel like I kind of know kind of what's going on upstairs. He's just doing what he like. Julio is somebody that I really think is a generational talent, but I worry, like, is like what he did this year, like in the beginning of the year, or does that concern you with like the really cold, I would say like what, pretty much
4 months,
70, 80 games? Yeah. Like, does that concern you at all?
It doesn't so much because he turned it around. The adjustments he made, the sophomore slump is real. Like, everybody knew. I've talked to Mariners and talked about like, okay, people are going to adjust to him. Like, pitchers are smart, and the kind of analytics people have now against players, you can see to the exact inch like where their weak spot is, and you have the numbers to prove it. And people were going to figure out what is his weakness, and it was inside pitches, high and in. And they'd get him high and in early, and then they'd go out and away late to get him to strike out. And he came off of last season as the AL Rookie of the Year. Expectations were way up here. And I think the reason why he's so relatable to everybody is he works his tail off, but he's also incredibly genuine. Like, he's not the kind of Russell Wilson where he was incredibly successful and you totally respected his work ethic, but there wasn't a genuine aspect to him that you could really link onto. There was some corny stuff, and like people saw through it, and other fans loved it, like he did a lot of good for the community. Julio does a lot of good for the community. He raises spirits. He's always smiling. And I think just the fact that he's always enjoying what he's doing, he's still competitive as heck, but he's talking, like you said, anytime he gets on second, he's talking to the shortstop or to the second baseman or to the center fielder, making jokes with, I forget who he did it to when he pretended he didn't make the catch and he pretended it was.
Yes, that was so awesome. That was probably one of the moments of the year. Like, even Logan Gilbert thought it was a home run. Like,
yeah, he convinced everybody. And just to have fun with baseball that way, like, baseball is trying to become more fun and more exciting and bring in more, the younger generation. He is your crowning jewel to do that because he's got the personality, charisma, smile, talent to do all of that. But the struggle to start the year doesn't really worry me. It was it was a massive struggle. Don't get me wrong. I'm not discounting that, but he made serious changes to his stance. He listened to coaching, and that's kind of been something that stood out a little bit with people that I've talked to, analysts, and hearing Scott Servais talk after almost every game because we watch, through sports and run his sound. I've heard a few times that, he's listening to coaching and then they'll kind of step back and be like, not like he wasn't before, which screams he probably wasn't as much before, like he has his own hitting coach. I know he's a coachable, humble guy, but to hear adjustments from professional MLB, like your own MLB team, it seems like that may have been a slower adjustment for him, is like listening to more coaching and like widening his stance a little bit, getting into the base of his body more. And that makes him, get through the strike zone faster, get through the zone in general quicker. So I think that has been an adjustment for him, and to see him skyrocket in August against great pitchers. And he totally turned around his pitches inside, like the inside pitches, he was killing. The improvement in numbers was phenomenal. So he faced a bit of an adjustment, but good hitters come through, and he has.
Okay. So Mariner After Dark, formerly known as Twitter, now X, I always see them calling for Scott Servais's head. I got a hypothetical again. If they don't make the playoffs, is Scott Servais out as the GM?
I don't think so. Him and Jerry, who is president of baseball operations, are such a package deal. And I think at the very least, they'd give him another chance, which I can't say I'm going to call for anyone's job. It's just.
Most definitely. No, we want him there.
I mean, you want the best person in there. You want someone who can motivate the team, and you want the person that can motivate them throughout. And if he doesn't motivate them throughout September, there's absolutely fair conversation to talk about should he be in that position, because you look at the amount of years. I believe he's the longest tenured Mariners manager now, even past Lou Piniella. I can't remember what the numbers are there, but outside of Lou Piniella, I think he's the second most. He has been to the playoffs one time, and you can only do so much with your own lineup, but there's also a relatability that, this is a younger generation of players, and they're very different than the old style. Like some of the unwritten rules in baseball, this younger generation isn't following. And if you have a manager who sides one way or the other, are you still relatable? I don't know. Can he connect with his players? Sure. He got them to believe last year, and last year was a freaking party. Like, that was so fun to see him come out and like smoke a cigar and enjoy that success, because I know he works incredibly hard. But it will absolutely be a conversation amongst the media. It's going to be on every radio show, as you know. Like, that will be a topic if they don't make the playoffs.
Yes, I always see another thing that I see a lot that people say is that he leaves in the pitching staff too long. Do you feel like he leaves them in too long? What do you see with that?
I know George Kirby believes it. I don't know. It's well known. One of my best friends went to Gonzaga. She married Mark Gonzalez. So I know he always wants to stay in games. And there were moments where I can read his body language. He would never tell me that kind of thing. Like, oh, I should have been in longer. You can read body language. He wants to be out there longer, longer. I know he's not, clearly not the ace that they wanted him to be when he was first traded, and he was in a really tough situation. Different kind of decisions to make with Logan Gilbert and George Kirby. But I don't know. I think it's always going to go one way or the other. You can't make everybody happy. Some guys are gamers. Like George Kirby complained about going into the seventh inning, immediately retracted the comments, apologized for it. But the week before, a few weeks before, he went 9 innings on Felix's Hall of Fame night. So, and he shut him out. They still lost that game in classic Felix, getting Felix
fasting. Yes.
But I don't think you're ever going to make anyone happy. And I think there needs to be communication, and he's got to be able to read his players. But I can't say one way or the other. Sometimes it's either too long. Sometimes it's like Logan Gilbert's pissed because he's not out there for the next inning.
I think it's really interesting. That's something that I've seen all year long. People have really said that, and it's just kind of frustrating. One last question on the Mariners. Do you feel like that the bullpen is gassed?
Yeah, I think losing Paul, you used a lot of different guys to step up in that role and to try and fill that role. Every bullpen is gassed at this point, though, and a lot of teams made changes within their bullpen at the deadline. Andres Munoz, he's dealt with a lot of injuries this year. I mean, he dealt with the one that took him out for like 2 months early this season. So his velocity was down. I don't know if it's back to what it was yet. I haven't really checked those numbers, but his velocity was down like a mile an hour, 2 miles an hour. So when you're not quite as effective, it's like they're going to need you more often. That the starting rotation in September has needed more help, though. So I'm sure their usage has gone up quite a bit in September. But yeah, especially when you look at Bryce Miller and Brian Wu, you could argue he shouldn't even be out there. His innings limit he's way surpassed that in his first year. So, I mean, some nights like last night, he went 3 1/3. So and that's happened a few times. Bryce Miller has gotten knocked out of games early. I think Matt Brash, Andres Munoz, those kind of guys, I think they're going to step up toward the end of this. I know they might be gassed, but they're young enough to have the kind of push to make this playoff push. I really do believe we'll see what happens tonight in the starting of this Houston series, but they've got the belief, and I feel like the bullpen really needs to step up and be phenomenal to close this out. The lineup as well, like, got to get the offense and have to get those timely hits. 3 for 15 with runners in scoring position those first 2 games against Texas is not going to do the job, but I think they'll be fueled by the pitching as well. I think they'll come together. I think they make a playoff push.
I sure hope so. I always, like all my Mariner fans know, there is no Marco Gonzalez slander over here. It's we only talk good things. I don't know if it's because I have an affinity because I am a Spokane baby, so it might be like it might be the Gonzaga roots or what it is, but there is no slander on our end for Marco. Okay, last sports question. Give me your thoughts on the Pac-12 and what you see transpiring.
Well, a lot of it is going to come down to how the numbers come out. Oregon State and Washington State, I think a lot of people just thought it was going to be a plug in all the Mountain West teams and keep the Pac-12 because it's a valuable name. It's a valuable asset. It's still a Power 5 conference. That's huge when it comes to the college football playoff. But it turns out it's not that necessary because the college football playoff expands to 12 teams next year. A lot more teams will get in, and Oregon State, Washington State can have the chance to basically back up what they've been saying. We are that level of team. Maybe you can still do it without having, the typical Power 5 conference. But what's going to be really important, there's a lot of lawsuits against the Pac-12 conference. If you're the final 2 teams left in it, you're the ones who have to face those. I mean, it's with Comcast, it's with the former 2 CEO and CFO, I believe, who are suing the Pac-12 for wrongful firing. There's a lot of problems to deal with, and they're trying to work out with Pac-12 lawyers and accountants the numbers that they would be responsible for. So I think ideal scenario would be those lawsuits aren't there and they don't have to deal with it. They can continue to be the Pac-12, add Mountain West schools in. But I think it's going to be a waiting game in the next 30 days. I think Kirk Schultz said that, Washington State president. They'll find out and then see if it's basically worth taking on those liabilities. Because there's assets, obviously net assets, but there's liabilities. At the end of it. Yeah, go ahead.
Keep going. Why is it that Colorado is more valuable than WSU? Because I personally, I live in Denver. Colorado is cool and it is the talk of the town right now, but they're not like, they've never been relevant. I mean, I don't want to say that. I'm a 98 baby, so like they have not been relevant since I've been born. Like, why is it that they are more relevant than WSU? I feel like WSU's been good since Mike Leach pretty much got there. Was like 7, 8 years ago, 9 years ago, 10 years ago.
Yeah, they had a chance to be a college football playoff team with Gardner Minshew, but then they lost to the Huskies in the Apple Cup. They're a phenomenal program. They've always, and they all say this too, they've over-delivered for their numbers financially. Like they haven't, the women's team won the Pac-12 tournament this year. They beat, like Stanford did not, UCLA did not. It was Washington State. Like they've really done a lot with their resources. Pullman is a hard place to recruit to. Boulder is closer to Denver. It's what, an hour and a half, Boulder from Denver.
Yeah.
Colorado's a big deal because of Deion Sanders this year. There's no question about it. I was just reading an article about a guy who covered the Buffs last year. When they lost to UW in their final game, he was the only reporter asking Mike Sanford questions. The only reporter for a college football team.
That's wild.
If you look at the numbers, I mean, Colorado is going back to the Big 12 because they already have that connection. They're close. It's literally location. And respect to their program now. It's a fun year, and I'm so glad that they're doing well because it makes the whole Pac-12 more fun. But when you look at the numbers, Washington State, when you look at ACC, Pac-12, and Big 12, Washington State has had the 6th most 1 million plus viewers since 2015 in games. That's crazy. And I think they're the 4th most watched Pac-12 team. So, I mean, Mike Leach made a huge difference, but the Coug fan base is so, so loyal. They like suck you in. They make you want to be a Coug if you're not. Like, they make you want to be one, especially Mike Leach. Like, I loved covering that team when I worked in Spokane. But it's the connection they already had with the Big 12, and it's Deion Sanders for Colorado. That is why they are a little bit ahead of Washington State. Washington State doesn't have an easy conference to join. They don't want to sacrifice playing cross country. They're really against that, sending their athletes to Rutgers.
I don't think I would want to do that if I was a football player.
If I was
go on a plane. Yeah, like that would be so. Okay, so that's another question. Okay, for you, I have one more question for you. With the travel, this has always been my biggest thing. What do you see that the problem being with travel? As somebody that played a sport that you play, 2-3 games a week sometimes, are they gonna actually, like, is the class aspect, like, are they gonna still be in class? Like, is that just blown out of proportion, or is that like an actual, like, because I always remember in college, like the track players, indoor track or indoor and then outdoor season, they were always gone. Once a week, they're always gone doing something. Like they were out like at WSU or at UW. Like, is that going to play a factor into things, do you think, into like the mental of like a football player, and like that translate to the field or to the basketball court?
No doubt about it. I think football is going to be kind of reasonable because they get to charter. They don't have to wait around for security lines. They don't have to wait around for different flights to leave an airport. In the WAC, I came into the WAC, and I've talked to UW football coach Kalen DeBoer. He's not really worried at all about going Big Ten and the travel for the football team. They're going to provide a lot of resources. UW and Oregon will provide a lot of resources to help their players, and UCLA, USC. UCLA is hiring a sleep expert to make sure that they're the same one that like Boston Celtics coach Brad.
Of course they are.
Right? Of course, because they got the money. But
yeah.
They are taking it seriously, the mental health side of it. I think it's not going to affect football as much because they'll probably play a closer non-conference schedule, and it's kind of ideal that you can go play former Pac-12 games in the non-con to make people happy, make fans happy. So you have less travel there. Where it's going to hurt is softball, baseball, basketball, potentially soccer, track and field, like you talked about. Track and field, even then, they don't really have a ton of. I talked to UW's track coach as well. They don't have a ton of individual meets at one school. There's a lot of like, they're going to meet here. So, and a lot of home meets for Washington. Basketball, when I joined the WAC, it was Hawaii to La Tech. Like, that's the Western Athletic Conference.
Yeah.
That's fun far. As all get out. But like, yeah, that's like an entire continent. Basically the United States, if you go from one to the other, like East Coast to West Coast. We would leave on Wednesday mornings at like 5 a.m. And UW will have some charter for their non-football sports, I think. But we had to leave at 5 a.m. to get to the airport by 7 because we had to go to Spokane. And that's why it kind of hurts to be in Pullman because a lot of teams fly into Spokane and drive. And then we would play Thursday, travel Saturday to another place, usually a bus ride, hour and a half, 2 hours, probably 3 hours capped, right? But we did a lot of the drives from Denver to Boulder. We played at Boulder twice, and then we played at Wyoming. So, but in conference, we wouldn't get back until Sunday night because you fly out, you play Saturday night, and your second game, you fly out Sunday morning, and we wouldn't get back until like 4 or 5 at night. Moscow, again, is not the easiest place, but there's a lot of places a little bit bigger than Moscow. I mean, Bloomington's not that easy to get to. College Station is not that easy to get to. Or College Park. I can't remember Penn State right now. But even Eugene is not the easiest place to get to. So that's going to affect travel. It's going to make things harder. And the benefit of Washington State is like your family gets to see you play too. And you get to travel to those rivalries. It'll be cool for UW fans to go cross state, cross country for like a few games in the first couple of years to play Big Ten teams. I don't know how long that's going to last. And if I'm a parent, I'm like, I want to be able to watch my kids play and not have to fly cross country to see half their games.
I agree. That was something that, who was I talking to? Do you know Andy Patton? Does the Locked On Zags.
Yeah.
So I was talking to him about that, about the just like the travel and everything. I just feel like that's going to be a big problem. I don't know though. I don't know nothing. So like, obviously like, If I did know, I would like. Andy told me this. He was like, if I did know, I'd be making a lot of money, and I was like, yes, like that is very true. Okay, I want to kind of transition. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. They'll throw a lot of resources at it.
Okay, so I kind of want to transition off the kind of like the sports topic, maybe more into like the reporting and things like that. How do you stay unbiased when you're reporting?
You just take the fan side out of it. Like I still care as much as a fan would, probably even more so with all the research and the preparation that goes into it. But I just don't have the fan side anymore, which when everyone says like, oh, I want to go into sports reporting, you kind of have to realize you don't really get to be a fan anymore. Like you have to take that fandom out of it for your home teams. Like I'm lucky. I get to cover teams that I grew up watching, but you basically just have to respect both sides. You have to respect the opponent as much as you respect the team that you know well, and realize that you're reporting to an audience that wants the truth. Like I think of Mariners After Dark on Twitter. I don't want to be someone that's only pandering to the positive side. I want to be honest, and someone that people can be like the genuine kind of reporter. I think that's always been a really important thing for me. And it's kind of hard to go from athlete where everything is positive and you're answering questions in media conferences really positively. But I think you've got to be straight up. And I think you just have to take it as like, you have to realize you don't get to be a fan anymore when you enter this industry. You still care as much or more, like I said, in terms of research and preparation, but you have to step out of being a fan.
Yes, I think that's very important. I always tell people, and if you know me, I'm a big Seattle fan, things like that. So I always tell people this is who I'm rooting for. So you can like it or you cannot like it, and it is what it is. Give me a story of a time where maybe something wasn't going right when you were doing like a live report or something like that, and how you just kind of pulled it together, or maybe what happened.
Oh, I mean, honestly, full disclosure, that happens all the time.
All the time. I hear, yes.
You kind of just black out. Like, what was I just saying? Where am I going with this? It's the same thing as everything else. Reps make you better at it. And you don't really realize until I look at stuff when I first started in Spokane to what, maybe something I didn't feel great about doing last week. I see the growth and the difference, and it's all with reps. And honestly, it's being as present as you can before your live shot. If you're out there talking to a bunch of people, it's always good to be social and like enjoy what you're doing, absorb the environment. But you also have to take a moment like before you're about to go live and really focus on 3 bullet points, right? Or 3 keys you want to hit. What does the audience need to know? And what do you care about that the audience should care about? Translating that. So the process of like the moment you hit the blackout, it's just kind of recalling like, okay, surroundings, situation, environment. What soundbite might I be tossing to? Am I tossing to a Scott Servais soundbite on Julio? Am I tossing to Pete Carroll talking about Jamal Adams coming back? having that presence of mind of, you have to have structure. Basically, you rely on the structure of what you're talking about, and that helps to remember if you're present right before for a few minutes. The meditation side of stuff, the mindfulness, that makes a big difference. And then you're more clear with what you get to, because you don't want to be hitting 9 million different topics. Like some of the questions you've asked, and I've gone 10 different ways. You can't do that in a live shot. You have to be able to you have to define 3 things you really want to talk about.
Okay, I like that. The bullet points. That's really good. It's a really good idea. What has been the most impactful lesson you've learned on your journey?
There have been a ton. It really is hard to put one more important than the other, but I think what I always come back to is being yourself on air. It's much harder to do than say. You can say you want to have personality, you can say you want to be like this, but then you're kind of bogged down with all this information that you want to get in. And for me, sometimes entering as a female, I've never received much like doubt or hate or anything rude. Much like Mina Kimes, you follow her and you see all the things that people will say to her.
Mm-hmm.
But she does her research. She does a phenomenal job at presenting information. And I think trying to sometimes prove that I should be in the position I'm in, that's where I learned you don't need to do that. You're here for a reason. Be yourself, be genuine, trust the experience that you have playing professionally overseas, playing in college, and those moments that, that's an advantage you have over other reporters. But other reporters have an advantage because they've watched the game longer than you, or they were really plugged in to the 92, 93, 94 Sonics, and you kind of have to go back and do your research on that and watch the clips, all that stuff. Everybody has a different niche, and you have to lean into your own strengths. Don't become something that you're not. And that's something Keith Oso was really helpful in teaching me, like his personality. Be yourself on air. Otherwise you turn into a robot.
What are your thoughts of like the Stephen A. Smiths of the world and the Skip Baylesses and those types of bobbleheads?
Yeah, and pokers, like they're always starting something, especially Skip Bayless. They've made a career out of what they've done. Stephen A. Smith is incredibly well researched. I don't care if you hate him, if you can't stand him. He makes points based off of a lot of research. And listening to his radio show, I listened to his radio show when he was on during the midday time on the Pacific time zone. He has constant thoughts that are valuable. Like he does. The hot take culture I don't love. I'm not a fan of it. Like straight up, don't love it. Because I feel like it devalues athletes. It devalues the work they put in. And it's just cheap, honestly, some of the stuff that both of them say and do. But he gets paid a lot of money to put himself and his face on the line for people to criticize. And that comes at a cost. So willing to be there. But I don't think for 1 second that he hasn't done his research and doesn't know what he's talking about. I wonder about that on the Skip Bayless side. Sometimes the things that he says, I'm like, that is actually incorrect. So I'm not a part of the hot take culture. I don't love it. That's one thing I would like to change about sports media, but it gets some clicks and it gets people involved sometimes. And a lot of people wake up and love the shows that Stephen A. Smith is on. And I do love that Shannon Sharp sometimes mistakes Stephen A. for Skip.
For Skip, yeah. I do. I see that. Yes. Okay, so I don't know if you've seen more recently, but him and Terrell Owens, he made a comment about Terrell Owens about when Terrell Owens said that he wasn't black enough or something like that. But
did not see that.
I want to say Skip Bayless, Shannon, Stephen A. Smith. There we go. All the pundits. Stephen A. Yeah, but everybody's just mad at Stephen A. Smith because he basically called Terrell Owens broke, and that I don't know if you know, but Terrell Owens got taken advantage of by his I don't know if it was his agent or whatever. Yeah, but he just made some kind of distasteful comment, especially to it was when Skip made that comment to Shannon Sharp about him, who cares that he only played or that Tom Brady played 10 extra years than he did. And like, I don't like when people like that are trying to be disrespectful, because those are Hall of Famer. Those are they were the best and like Terrell Owens was somebody I grew up with when I grew up watching sports. I just felt like it was very distasteful for Stephen A. Smith and somebody that has a platform like that. Okay. My question, though, that I wanted to get into, what is your thoughts on reporters that don't play the sport talking on the sport, or a sport in particular?
Yeah, well, I think the first example you look at is there's a lot of coaches that didn't play, phenomenal coaches that didn't play the sport. So if they're well researched and there's common sense. If there's just like no common sense there, then no matter what you've done, there are also athletes that have played that don't do a good job on air. It happens all the time. Like I took a long time for me to really feel like I was in my groove. And there were times where I'm like, I am a former athlete and I don't know what I'm saying here, doing here. I'm doubting myself. I absolutely believe reporters who have not played can be incredible reporters, sometimes the best reporters, because they haven't played, because they're not thinking in a way that an athlete would. There are total advantages and disadvantages to that, because a lot of athletes think in sequential ways, just like a coach would. If you can be a reporter that's from the outside, that's why you bring in consultants. That's why you bring in data analysts. That's literally the opposite of an athlete coming in to help your team and make you better. You see data analysts in every sport now, MLB, NBA. I mean, total nerds that are the best kind of nerds that totally change the game for people. And there are a lot of players. If you look, a lot of coaches that have a ton of success at high levels when they didn't even play in college. Maybe they played in high school. So I'm a total fan of reporters that have not played. I mean, there are, Seahawks beat reporters and Husky basketball reporters that didn't play at a super high level, but I love reading their stuff because I know they're intelligent people. It's all about intelligence and care, like how much you care, how much effort you put into it.
Most definitely. With technology moving really rapidly, what would you like to see stay the same?
I think technology can't replace a lot of things. I guess some of it comes down to some of the analytics with baseball, not relying on gut as much, just because the numbers are there. And there are a lot of organizations that rely too much on numbers, where it's like, but this guy, like rely on him, see what happens. I think it's taken over from a numbers standpoint too much with analytics and player putting those numbers on players to see what will happen, like just trusting those too much to determine the outcome of the game. 90s, Michael Jordan only had so many analytics to rely on, yet he was one of the most dominant players in the history of sport in general. So that's one thing that I wouldn't like to change as much. I don't want to see robot fans in stadiums anymore, Chargers. I know that was like to promote the creator. I don't want to see that.
That's wild. Yeah. No.
Yeah, I don't need that. And then I think just the writing side of stuff, the opinion, the editorial commentary, like that will always be human. The thought, the compassion, the passion that goes into those kind of monologues or editorial articles. And someone told me high up at Fox a few weeks ago, you'll never be able to replace play-by-play or color analysis in games.
Shout out to, yes, that is something that is very true. I never thought about that. Yeah, you could never.
To the level of like someone you love to watch and listen to, right?
Yeah, like the Sunday Night Crew or somebody. Yeah, they could never replace I agree with you on that one.
Like, can you imagine trying to replace Chris Berman with a robot? There's no way.
Couldn't happen.
I know he's not in it as much anymore, but
Chris Berman is something. He was somebody I was thinking about a little while ago. Of course, I don't wish it on anybody, but I was like, when he dies, it's gonna be really sad. Like, because he's somebody that I grew up with for like ever. Like, that's somebody that like I used to grow up with, like turn on the TV and he would be on Sundays. Like, yeah. I just thought about that a couple of days. I was like, dang, that's gonna be really sad. Okay, back to a little bit more happier note. What is a misconception people have about you before they meet you?
Ooh, I should ask more people that question. I mean, it's probably that I'm like very, maybe nicer than people think that I am. I don't know. I'm serious, and I'm a smiler. I'm kind to people. I want to help out as many people as I can. But being 6'1" and female, not exactly the most approachable kind of human. So I've been told. But I've never been told I like look mean. I don't know. I would say, I guess that I try to be as nice to everyone as I can. That's one thing. One of your list of questions, like what's something you would change about the world, is like just more love in general, like extending love and grace to as many people as you can, because that makes everything better and less selfish, less based on yourself, and like less focused on yourself, which is also like chasing success is in itself a little selfish. And I think too much chase of a success, like you want to accomplish things and be a good person and like achieve big things, but at the same time not sacrificing how you treat other people. And that's something I like lesson from my parents way early on, is always treat other people well. So yeah, I don't know, I could be wrong on that. I should ask people if I look mean or not fun to approach, but I hope I can change their minds.
What is a theory or maybe a conspiracy theory that you see that maybe you either really agree with or that you don't agree with, but that you see people run with?
Jeez. I'm not a huge conspiracy theory researcher, so I can't even think of, I mean, this whole Mexico, the aliens thing, it's not really conspiracy. I know they've done some analysis and some testing, but
yeah.
I generally stay away from that stuff because I'm already researching all these other things that I like know are factual. There's a lot of popular ones out there, like the flat Earth thing. It's clearly not something I believe at all. Like, but I think there's life outside of Earth. I guess that's one thing that I do believe.
With media being so fast paced, how do you keep up with it?
I honestly do try to make sure I unplug for at least one day a week, because then I'm more motivated to stay up on Twitter, to stay up on email. Now that I'm at Fox, I do get, like, it's a great thing, getting a lot of emails about like Pac-12 updates, betting odds, community events, pressers coming up, staying on top of that stuff, and then reading as much as I can. Like, I will set aside 2 nights a week where I'm just going to my favorite places to read, like The Athletic or Pac-12 Hotline, John Wilner, Seattle Times, Spokesman Review. There are so many good places. And like these individuals, John Canzano has his own subscription-based newspaper, and Christian Capel, who was with The Athletic. I just like setting aside that amount of time, at least twice a week, to make sure you're read up on stuff and to see how other people are seeing things too. So you're not just getting absorbed into your own little world of how you watch the Seahawks game or how you watch the Mariners as they try to turn this into a playoff season, making sure you set aside time to read other people's work.
Are you a Reddit person?
Not that much. Every now and then it's like a really weird question where I'm like, very specific. I can't remember what I was looking up on Reddit, like literally yesterday. It was something specific. Oh, it was about how to, of course, sports related, but like which websites are the best to find QB pressures, QB hits in live games without paying for it. Cheap over here, but I'm like, can I get Fox? I need to get Fox to pay for some of that stuff.
Yeah, they should be. You.
I know. To get up on that, but yeah, Reddit. I usually I give myself like a 2-comment limit. The further deeper I get in, I think I'm on some sort of like thread notification for the Mariners that pops up every time I log into my laptop, that's a pretty dark place too. Are you a Reddit fan?
I'm not like a fan, but like I always like when I have things like that I think about and I'm like, okay, I wonder what other people are thinking about this. Like, and then I go look and I'm like, okay, we're thinking the same thing. So we're on this like, or they're thinking this. So, okay, maybe I'm obviously maybe at step 3, I'm a little off, but I enjoy Reddit because I just like the knowledge that, or like what other people have to say. Of course, you got to take it with a grain of salt because it is Reddit. But yeah. Last question for you, and then we'll be done here. What is your definition of success?
Hmm. It's certainly evolved over the last 5, 6, 7 years. I think it's having successful relationships primarily. I'm a faith-based person, and that relationship in faith is number one for me. Relationship with family and close friends is right there too, and continuing to like check in on your people, making sure that I'm doing that with them, and like also, giving up some of my info, and like having just, I think community, you just talked about it, whether it's on Reddit or whether it's with like humans outside of it. Community is really important, and staying up with your people, making sure they're happy and that you're being a productive member of society. Volunteering whenever I can, trying to get back into that now that we hit the fall. And then work generally work kind of used to be 1 or 2. And once you let go of some of that, it takes the pressure off of like, I want to be on ESPN, or I want to be on Fox National, Fox Sports. I want to be doing this ESPN game. That kind of takes the pressure off. Like, you just realize the process will happen as it should, as long as you're working like crazy. If I feel proud of the work and the research that I've done, that's success to me. And continuing to be myself. Like in a work realm, those are the 2 things. Research like crazy, prepare yourself, talk to other people. That's something I wish I did more of, like getting into the business, reaching out to people that I thought were out of my, like level, some of the national people, and they'll have conversations with you, and like you're in Denver right now and I'm in Seattle. Like normally our realms may not cross physically, but like you reaching out and wanting to have conversations like that produces success. And again, like just instills morals too. Like all the questions you've asked me, which are phenomenal. That's kind of like what, you want to make progress as a human, not just in your professional world. So it's definitely morphed for me over the years.
I always love, that's always the question that I wrap everything up on. That's, everybody always has a different definition of success, and I always love hearing what other people perceive success as. And that's super awesome. And I agree with you 100%. We have Alyssa Charlston with us, Fox 13 sports anchor / reporter. We really appreciate her for coming on today. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having